We are all part of Nexus Community Partners. We are celebrating 20 years in St. Paul, Minnesota. The purpose of our organization is to build engaged and powerful communities of color so that each and every person can flourish in a joyful and abundant life. The programs that we support here at Nexus, we're home to the Boards and Commissions Leadership Institute, the North Star Black Cooperative Fellowship, the Open Road Fund, the Reclaiming Our Own Time, and our Shared Ownership Center. All four of us are part of the Shared Ownership Center, and we are the ones that are presenting to you this afternoon.
Yeah, and the Shared Ownership Center, what we are is a team of consultants that support BIPOC communities in building community wealth. And we do this mainly being cooperative developers, assisting folks in starting worker cooperatives and real estate cooperatives, specifically real estate investment cooperatives. And we do that through a number of channels. We'll sort of unpack that as we go through this presentation.
And so this is our team. You've heard from Benjamin Tsai, the director of the Shared Ownership Center, Christina Nicholson, cooperative finance developer, Deanna Siegel-Garcia, program manager, and myself, Patty Biafra. I'm the director of the Worker Ownership Initiative. So let's talk a little bit about what are cooperatives. They are for-profit businesses. So that's a key piece to know, that cooperatives are for-profit businesses, just like any other business. They're just a different entity type. They are businesses that are owned by the members that use the co-op to provide them that service. So there's different types of co-ops, and we'll get into that. But the key piece is that the users, so when we're talking about worker co-ops, we're talking about the workers. When we're talking about consumer co-ops, we're talking about the consumers. Those are the owners of the business. The members benefit from the services provided. They might get potential discounts or profit sharing. And most importantly is that members have a vote in how the co-op is governed. So types of cooperatives, you might be most familiar with farmer and producer cooperatives, where farmers are sharing storage or processing facilities. They might be sharing buying power, financial and savings. Credit unions are member organizations. Consumer cooperatives, such as REI, are cooperatives where the consumers are the owners. Grocery cooperatives are also pretty common in this sector. Real estate, so we'll talk in much more depth about real estate investment cooperatives, where a group of community members come together to purchase real estate for profitable venture. And then finally, worker cooperatives, where the employees own the business. These tend to be smaller businesses, but growing. And they can be in any sector of the economy. They're not just for small businesses. As you can see here, agriculture contributes significantly, and cooperatives in general contribute significantly to the economy. And we just wanted to share that, while we may be used to seeing cooperatives in our neighborhood as smaller businesses, they are a growing sector and are a contributor to a significant contributor. They're governed by the 7 cooperative principles. I won't go into each of these, but open and voluntary membership, democratic member control, and I think autonomy and independence are key to the cooperative movement, where we see businesses that thrive, businesses that are more resilient in times of downturn. And that's because often they work together, because there is member economic participation, because there is thinking about the members beyond just profit for an individual or for an investor. I'll pass it back to you, Christina.
So I want to spend a little time today unpacking worker-owned cooperatives. I know we have a wide range of audience today, and we thought that it would make sense to spend a little time just talking exactly about some of the specifics of structure of worker-owned cooperatives. So I'm happy to spend some time with you all today talking about that. Specifically, what we're going to talk about is worker-owned cooperatives. Worker-owned cooperatives in the United States. So right now, worker-owned cooperatives are the smallest sector in the United States. They also, we believe, have the greatest potential. There are about 600 worker-owned cooperatives in the United States, and they employ about 600 workers. They employ about 7,000 workers in about 600 different cooperatives. Right now, the Cooperative Home Care Associates in the Bronx is the single largest cooperative, worker-owned cooperative, and it houses more than 2,000 employees. Specifically, worker owners have an objective path to ownership. They have a vote in governance. They share in the profits of the business. They have a through line to the financial performance of the organization, and they decide how to structure their management style. And it looks like someone has a question. Deborah, what's your question?
Hey, Deborah, I just unmuted you, so you should be able to talk. Otherwise, you could put it in the chat if it's not working. Let's see.
There's a note in the chat to please spend more time on each slide. So just a note for us to slow down a little bit.
Okay.
And we will be sharing the presentation, and we are recording as well.
Okay, that sounds good.
Thanks, Patty.
Okay, can you hear me now?
We can.
Okay, I just wanted to add, something came up. And I was wanting to know if this is going to be like can I watch this presentation at another time?
Yes. Yep. We're
Okay.
going to record the video as well, so you
Okay.
can go back and revisit it.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
You're so welcome.
Okay. Bye-bye.
So also the note to slow down a little bit, and I'll be happy to do that. So I want to talk a little bit about membership for worker-owned cooperatives. So each individual member-owned cooperative sets a minimum requirement in order for worker owners to be eligible for membership. Membership and ownership are the same thing. To be a member of a worker-owned cooperative is to be an owner of member-owned cooperative. So each cooperative customizes that eligibility, and as long as the criteria is fair and equitable, any criteria can be used. Some possible scenarios of criteria can include, so a recommendation from a coworker or a supervisor to invite someone into ownership, having worked at the cooperative for a certain amount of time. So for example, a minimum number of hours worked is a fairly common criteria to become a member owner of a co-op. And then completing a basic or in-depth work training, depending on the kind of worker-owned cooperative, as Patty mentioned earlier, because it's across sectors, some sectors have much more rigorous training required for that sector. So there's a wide range of criteria that can be required. So in terms of member buy-in, again, you're purchasing a share in a business, so you're buying into the business. The amount of money that a worker pays to become a member owner is the member buy-in. It can be paid over time. And again, there's a wide range of amounts. For that member buy-in, so the amount that they pay in, that they receive one vote in governance, and they also receive the right to receive profit sharing if that business is profitable. The price, the purchase price, is meant to be accessible to employees, but still meaningful. And then when the member leaves the cooperative, so when they no longer are a worker owner at that cooperative, they receive that initial buy-in back from the cooperative. So what are the roles of worker owners? Any and all eligible employees should have a clear and objective path to ownership of the cooperative business. So for example, in operations, the worker owners can fulfill any day-to-day business operations role. The ownership of the business is voluntary, and you do not need to be an owner in order to be a staff member. So ownership of the worker-owned cooperative is always voluntary. It is never mandatory. And that goes back to those 7 principles of open membership. In terms of governance, the worker owners elect the board of directors for the cooperative, and they also vote on important issues that are defined by the articles and bylaws that govern their individual cooperative. So some of the benefits of worker-owned cooperatives include keeping money in the local economy. As Patty mentioned earlier, employee-owned businesses are more resilient during economic downturns. They build wealth through asset ownership. They increase the voices of the workers in decision-making and ensure access to information. They create better wages and better benefits for employees overall. This includes quality jobs, a stable workplace, and again, better than average pay and benefits compared to similar jobs in comparable industries. So some common misconceptions about cooperatives: that worker owners have to make all the decisions together. That's not true. In reality, certain kinds of decisions can be divided between specific roles, committees, the board, or all of the members. Decisions made by all members are usually reserved for decisions that have a long-term effect over the entire cooperative and staff. And there are different kinds of cooperatives, and so the area I tend to focus in is in startups. So these are a group of people coming together initially to form a new business. So just talking a little bit about our services at the Shared Ownership Center in terms of startups. What we support in is training on decision-making and governance within a cooperative framework. So if you're forming a new business entity as a cooperative, we support you in understanding not only how to frame out the business, but how to make those decisions within a cooperative framework. We help review the business plan to make sure that you have a solid business strategy. We help you with the cooperative design, and that includes developing your articles and bylaws. This also leads to supporting your incorporation as a cooperative. We support and advise on a successful capitalization plan, which means finding sources and uses for funds for your cooperative. And then also we focus on operationalizing the business plan and supporting the launch. So once you have the business plan, your cooperative has been incorporated, how do you successfully operationalize and get your business started? And then after your business is launched, we also offer post-transition support, which means that now that you're up and running, we stay with you to help with governance, decision-making, and ensuring that your business has a solid platform to operate upon for years to come. All right, and now I'm going to hand it back to Patty to talk a little bit about cooperative transitions.
Thank you, Christina. Yes, so I work primarily with what we call cooperative transitions. So these are businesses that already exist that want to become cooperatives. And so that's a slightly different process than the startups. And our services there, the process or what makes a good transition is already having a healthy business that's generating cash flow. So the cooperative model isn't going to fix issues that are already within the business. So we're looking for businesses that are in a good position to transition. Usually we like to see an owner that is willing to stay throughout the transition process, and has a successor identified or isn't needed. And so that helps the process move along faster. We want to see 10 or more employees when we're talking about a transition, and a commitment to the process from the employees. So part of what we do with the transition early on is get to know the business, work with the owner to understand the financials. And then once they're ready, the owner, then we have a conversation with the employees to understand their commitment and their interest in becoming a worker cooperative. We do look for businesses that are 30% staffed by Black, Indigenous, and people of color. And we want to see the ability to generate meaningful patronage for the new owners. We understand, so this is generally a business sale. So the business will be paying for itself over time. But we want to see some patronage early on to incentivize people to stay on. So our services include what we call the feasibility. So that's that early service with the owner, understanding the business, kind of looking under the hood and really getting to understand the financials and getting to a price point that works for both the seller and the employees. We manage the process of transition. So we work with the owner to find legal support, to find tax support. We also work with the buyers to design what the co-op is going to look like, to develop what the business, ideally we don't want to change the business too much, but there's obviously some things that will change. We stay on after the transition. So after the business is sold, we stay on with the new owners to support the board, to support membership development. And as I mentioned, we have access and can provide referrals to attorneys, lenders, other consultants, and CPAs.
Hey, Patty, we had a question in the chat asking, what sources and types of financing do you see worker cooperatives most successfully raising at the startup or transition stage?
During transition, it's primarily lenders, so debt. The transitions are usually funded 50 to 70% from a lender, and 50 to 30% from the seller in the form of a note. With startups, unfortunately, co-ops don't solve the startups issues that we have. So it's usually the same thing with as you would have with any startup. You might have friends and family, you might have grants that you apply to. There might be some crowdfunding, but startups usually need a little more time before they're able to access debt capital.
Okay, great. Thank you. And then there's another question. Are there differences in cost of a startup versus a conversion? I guess you kind
of. Yes. So cost of a startup is going to be less because you're really just focused on and when we're talking about cost, we're talking about setting up the business. So you're really just focused on filing articles and getting your bylaws. So that's a lower cost, and it really depends on who you're working with. Most of the costs are going to come from getting your legal documents set up. On the transition side, costs are higher because you're also paying for the transaction piece, right? So when you're selling a business, there's additional legal work that needs to be done in terms of valuing the business, in terms of getting purchase agreements in place, finding management transition. So transitions do tend to be more expensive.
If I may add, it really does depend on the situation, though. We've seen actually a range where some transitions have been potentially more affordable than a transition. So, you know, the startup, it also depends not only on how much does it cost to kind of get incorporated, but what is your kind of operating capital needed to really kind of sustain the launch process and get kind of up and running to the point where you're actually generating enough revenue to, you know, to survive. So yeah, it's really case by case, but I think Patty kind of touched on it already, but with transitions, I mean, you're buying a business with history, so you really know, you have a much better idea of like the value of it, if you will, whereas a startup, highly risky. You're really, you know, you're focused on just sort of that operating capital for launch.
Okay, great. And then there's also a follow-up question asking, is there help in cost from the state cooperative fund? Is that referring to the local fund, maybe? Robert, if you want to type in the chat more what you mean, that would be great.
While they're doing that, there are a few government supports to cooperative development. Typically, it's mostly like free technical assistance. We're going to go over the local fund, which is specific to St. Paul. There are a couple. It really depends on the geography, I think, but I don't know of a state one.
They meant the local fund.
Yeah, so we'll be getting into that here shortly.
Thank you.
Okay, I think we are here. Thank you. And then finally, we work with existing worker cooperatives. Our work there is really focused on troubleshooting things as they come up. So as I mentioned, we stay on with the cooperatives that we work with. So we've done work such as working with boards, helping drive membership, operationalizing cooperative principles, and supporting policy development.
All right. And we also support real estate investment cooperatives. First off, I'm going to sort of just go through and try to give a high-level introduction to what those are, and then I'll talk about the services that we've been providing. So basically, these co-ops are a way to co-own real estate, typically commercial or mixed use. And the owners of these co-ops are either community members, like folks in the neighborhood and the broader area, or the business tenants, perhaps even residential tenants. But the ultimate goal is to really just provide affordable and stable locations for businesses and residents. They're meant to have a balanced approach towards like making everything affordable, not maximizing profit. Next slide. And kind of covered this a little bit, but the members typically again are either business tenants or residents of the area. And as a member owner, they have a vote similar to the worker co-ops, like one member, one vote. Generally, they're going to be electing board members on an rotating annual basis. And those board members are sort of really kind of guide the co-op to a large extent. However, as with all co-ops, all members do have a vote on certain critical decisions, which are defined in the bylaws. So these co-ops are still relatively new. We actually, in Minnesota, I believe, have the first real estate co-op in the country. It's Northeast Investment Co-op. And while they've been around for 10 or so years, they stood alone for a while. So we only have a handful to look at here in Minnesota now, but based off of that sample, we have share buy-in to these co-ops ranging from $10 to $1,000. And that buy-in literally gets you a share of this co-op. And that's your vote and your kind of right to profit sharing. And with the investment side of these co-ops, a membership also allows you to buy preferred shares. These are non-voting preferred shares that may get like an additional dividend. So a little bit of a return on your investment should the co-op be successful. And again, we really like to emphasize that while they are about community wealth building, these co-ops really have to take a broad and balanced approach because, you know, the community at large needs to benefit not just the members or just the businesses. And so the mission of these typically really focuses on anti-displacement of local business and residents, decreasing extraction of wealth. So we're trying to sort of create an alternative to sort of the real estate speculators that we've seen operating in Twin Cities. It's I think at the root of it, it's there to create affordable spaces, either for businesses or residents. And at the heart of it, you know, local control. The members are typically from the local area, and they have the ultimate say over what these co-ops do. So it's sort of, it helps them create the vibrant neighborhood that they want to see, right? And that could be even like helping decide which businesses to support moving into the space. If folks don't want to see certain like corporate chains moving into the neighborhood, they can have a decision over that and really prioritize local businesses, for example. All right, next slide.
We had a question in the chat asking, how long does it take to realize a profit?
To realize a profit, I think it depends on the project. Right now in Minnesota, the other real estate cooperatives are so, besides Northeast, are so new that I think they might still be kind of in the just past launch phase. So I'm not sure that what their profit is yet. But Northeast, I mean, you have to talk to them, but I know that their first development on Central Avenue in North Minneapolis was a pretty stunning success for them. And so not long after kind of getting it all rehabbed and getting the businesses moved in, they were able to be profitable pretty quickly. I don't want to give a timeline because I don't know the exact number, but that one did work pretty well. And it looks like we have Michael Darker with a comment. He might know the answer to that.
Another question, what's the difference between a REIT and a RICO?
Yeah, I'm going to be careful to not drift into areas I don't know about, but real estate investment trusts, it's a more classic vehicle for investors to literally just make money. I'm not able to answer that question though. I'm sorry.
All right, thank you, Benjamin.
Yeah, I stick to my lane. All I do is co-ops. Anyways, so our services for these real estate investment co-ops, we really try to help in the startup phase. Like I said, we're co-op developers. That's what we do. So we help sort of get the co-op structure, the governance, the operational model kind of designed, get them incorporated, have a membership drive, like a plan for getting members onboarded, a plan for those preferred stocks. We really bring in a lot of technical assistance on the front end. These are, to be honest, relatively complicated and new. So there's a lot of like figuring stuff out. We also help try to connect them to sources of capital that could be either government supports or philanthropic grants or, you know, lenders. Really depends. But mainly we provide a connector role. We will be talking about the local fund here in a few minutes, so we are able to sort of also play a facilitating role to potential grants that we'll get into later. And then when needed, we can provide some project coordination, but mainly we're more TA providers. We're not able to provide staff, like direct staff support.
We have another question asking, in relation to cooperative size, does your institution have a co-op membership limit that we work with?
If I understand the question correctly, I mean, these co-ops can have as many members as they want. Typically, we're seeing, I think, 35 to over 300 members in a co-op currently. On the lower end, that's when it's just business owners owning. For example, out in Brooklyn Park, there's a co-op of 35 business owners that co-own a shopping center. And on the higher end, that 300 number, that's Northeast Investment Co-op, for example. They're somewhere around there. And that's largely community members. And so it kind of depends on the model. And you can have both together, both businesses and community members owning. So hopefully that answers their question. But feel free to add to it if you need.
Okay, thank you. I think that's it for now.
Okay.
So as we've been touching on, we are going to talk a little bit about the local fund today. So I'm going to kick us off with a little bit of information about the local fund. And so we wanted to highlight that the local fund is supported by a federal award that has flowed through the American Rescue Plan. So there are details about that in the slide deck and as part of the presentation. So the local fund is part of a relationship that we at Nexus have with the city of St. Paul. And so it is a worker ownership fund that we partner with them on. And so what specifically the local fund does is that it allows for us to support with both services and direct grants. So it goes towards achieving these specific goals, which is providing technical assistance and training. So business and financial planning for cooperatives. So as both Benjamin and Patty mentioned, we work to provide technical assistance around not only the cooperative development, but the business and financial planning for business to ensure that it is starting on a strong foundation. So we do that planning for the cooperatives, the technical assistance to establish a cooperative business structure specifically. Then we also provide grant opportunities. So we provide grants for business expansions or startup grants. So we provide them for both kinds of cooperatives. We also have available funds for emergency financial hardship assistance. And then we can provide stipends for members of small co-op startups and conversions, understanding that there's labor that goes into that work. In addition, in terms of participant eligibility, for startups that want to receive technical assistance, they need to have at least 3 founders as a minimum. So at least one of them needs to be a St. Paul resident. They need to commit to incorporating their business in St. Paul. And they need to demonstrate a negative economic impact or meet the Small Business Administration disadvantage business qualification. So we provide a range of grants, typically between 50,000 and 150,000, based on the availability of funds, the potential impacts, and needs of the business. So in terms of where they're located in St. Paul, we also have constraints around geography of where the businesses are located. And so for folks who are interested in learning more about the local fund, we have more information to share, but at a general level, these are some of the criteria. And here we go.
Yep. And so for the business expansion and transition grants, they need to be located in a qualified census tract in St. Paul. So this map shows that. You can also, when you receive the presentation, the link goes to where you can put in your zip code. Or they meet Small Business Administration disadvantaged business qualification. So it's one or the other. And again, this is grants that are 50 to 150K, and that's based on the availability of funds and potential impact and need. And then finally, for the emergency financial hardship assistance, these are available to existing cooperatives that have been in business for at least 2 years. So you don't have to have been a cooperative for at least 2 years. You have to be a cooperative and have been in business for at least 2 years. Must have at least 3 employee owners, must be located in St. Paul, anywhere in St. Paul. And the key here is that you must demonstrate negative impacts from the COVID-19 pandemic. These are smaller grants up to 30,000, again, based on availability of funds. The program ends in September of 2026, and it's rolling application. So as applications come in, then funds are available.
All right. So I'm going to speak about the other side of the local fund, which is the community ownership side. And that's really about the real estate cooperatives and other forms of shared ownership around real estate. So that means both commercial tenant co-ops, but also community investment trusts, commercial community land trusts, and various other hybrids of all of these. Basically, we are trying to support really broad-based ownership of real estate. And let's see, we've got 2 other. Oh, I see, we skipped a slide. I was wondering what happened. Yep, okay, maybe I'm gonna back up. Sorry, folks. And first talk about our services and grants. So in the community ownership side, the real estate side, the first level of support we have is feasibility assessment, which is, it's really technical assistance. So we can do what we call organizational assessments, which is really there to help co-ops mainly start up, incorporate, figure out how to get their governance structure in place, get a membership drive planned out, stuff like that. Sort of assess, you know, what gaps do they have organizationally, and we try to help them fill that. On the other side, we can do financial scans, which are basically like high-level site assessments. We have a team of commercial brokers who are able to basically, you know, if these co-ops are shopping around, they're still early stage, they don't have a property in mind yet, we can help do some quick site assessment just to see if it's a good fit before they go in deeper. And if they do find a site that they're really excited about, the second level of services, those are pre-development grants. When you're buying commercial real estate, it takes a tremendous amount of due diligence and work to make sure you can acquire and close and do it all safely. And what we can offer are grants up to $50,000 to cover costs for attorneys, environmental work, financial modeling, architectural design, surveys, and other types of due diligence. The list goes on. If you need, it's on our website, I believe, or we can email you, but the most types of pre-development, and it goes towards those professional service providers to do that work. Potentially, depending on funding, a co-op could get even more than one of these if needed. And then the third layer of support, if they go through pre-development, everything's looking great, and they move towards acquisition, there are potentially acquisition, demolition, rehab grants. They could be up to 200 to even 500,000, depending on funding availability again. Probably going to start out on the lower side till we see sort of how many co-ops are seeking funding. But I do want to add on this third level of support, these ADR grants, because this is all money coming from the American Rescue Plan. They have attached very specific restrictions on how the money is used. So when you see all these eligibility requirements and this, that, and the other, it's largely coming from federal guidelines. And that brings me to the point that one of the federal guidelines is that for these ADR grants, the property might have to be held in trust or have a lien on it. Just wanted to bring that up so folks, know that there's a couple things to kind of focus on if you are aiming for that third type of grant. We're able to move on.
We had a question come in asking what is meant by expansion? Is this employee or location expansion or any kind of cooperative investment?
Yeah, that was about the worker co-ops. I think basically what we were trying to say is that if there's an existing worker co-op or even a business that's transitioning into a worker co-op and expanding, there's potential support for that. Does that sound right, folks? Yeah. Hopefully that answers the question. But that's not related to the real estate side that we're talking about here currently.
Great. And then a little while ago, two folks asked about if there'd be something similar in Minneapolis, and Patty already answered, but just want to highlight that the Minneapolis Co-op Create Grant is something similar to what this program is.
Yes.
Or,
and we don't know how much longer that one's going to be running, but yeah, Co-op Create Grant. Also, Minneapolis has the BTAP, Business Technical Assistance Providers. We're one of them and can provide subsidized TA, limited amounts in Minneapolis. So there are a few options here and there.
okay.
All right.
Oh, sorry. We have another question come in.
Yep.
Tony is a owner/landlord of a duplex in a 4-bedroom single-family home where they rent out rooms to individuals who are returning from prison back to community. Are you saying in order for Tony to be eligible for grants, Tony would have to have their renters be part owner of their business in order to secure funding? In addition, Tony has to have the business be located in St. Paul, and one owner has to be a St. Paul resident. That was a question.
Yeah, so we'll get into eligibility here next, and hopefully that will answer your question. But maybe, how about we do that? I'll run through the slides, Tony, and then we'll circle back and see, what else we can kind of add to fill in your question, if that's cool. So let's see. But yeah, For eligibility to the community ownership program, it is real estate investment co-op, so you do need to have a member-owned real estate investment co-op, or which is either residents or commercial tenants, or even just community members broadly. It could also be a community investment trust or a commercial land trust. But in essence, it does have to have a commercial component. That is one of the requirements. The cool thing is that for the early stage TA, that feasibility study, we can help what we're calling prospective community-owned entities. So those are groups that haven't incorporated yet. There's actually not a co-op yet. They're just still forming, but they have a group of people who are actively organizing. We can help those with TA, technical assistance. They do need to have at least 3 founders, and at least one of them needs to be a St. Paul resident. If they're already incorporated as one of those forms of shared ownership entity, the majority of the members must be residents of St. Paul. And or the articles and bylaws should specify geographic focus on a QCT in St. Paul. And QCT is a qualified census tract, again, which we covered previously. Let's go to the next slide. Okay, all eligible projects must also have a prospective property on the city's vacant building list. And this is not the city's vacant lot list. It is a separate list, the vacant building list. It must also be located in a QCT from either 2002, 2022, 2023, or 2024. And it must include a commercial component. I guess, and the last part there is for that acquisition, demolition, and rehab grant, the entity must have a letter of intent or other legal engagement on an eligible property to move forward on that. I think we're good to move to the next slide. Okay. Yeah, the goals of this community ownership program is to increase and diversify the future community ownership entities. So it's all, you know, the co-ops, land trusts, etc. And to also at the same time increase and diversify local community ownership. And we're also trying to build the ecosystem around this because it takes a lot of people to make these happen, a lot of partners. And so we're also trying to increase the number of investors and lenders and other capital providers to make this happen. So hopefully that answers Tony's question, but Tony, if you have remaining questions, let us know.
We did have a question come in from Pat asking, it only applies to vacant buildings, not buildings that convert to tenant co-ops?
To qualify for this, you have to be focused on a vacant building that's on the City of St. Paul's vacant building list. And it has to have a commercial component, not just residential. And again, these are requirements because it's coming from the American Rescue Plan. This is just sort of what comes with all this support from the federal government.
Okay, no more questions have come in, but if folks have more, we have space right now for that.
All right, upcoming events.
Okay, Michael said, way to build the capacity next. Oh, okay, this was okay. Cool. Thanks, Michael. Not a question. Got it. Awesome. Yeah. Oh, we did get a couple questions. Okay, is there a link on the city's site of those buildings? for the vacant building list?
Yes. We can add that to the appendix of the slide deck when we're done. But yes, there is they update it monthly. And for those curious, we've had this question before, so I'll just jump into it. It's not just city-owned properties, it's any vacant owned building that the owner applies to have it put on this list. So it includes privately owned buildings and city-owned buildings. And actually the vast majority are privately owned buildings. So just to clarify, but yes, it is on the city website.
Serena asked, what are some examples of commercial services?
Oh, I mean, the classic examples would be that we're actually seeing in practice are classic retail businesses, service businesses. So we're talking real estate that has storefronts or offices, or it could be warehouses or whatever other type of business activities going on. But that's what they mean by commercial. Hopefully that answers the question.
No more questions have come in, so I can talk about upcoming events. So June, in a couple short weeks, is the 3rd annual National Conference on Black Cooperative Agenda. That's happening in downtown St. Paul, the Union Depot. It is being co-hosted with the Network for Developing Conscious Communities. They're based in Washington, D.C., and Youth Prize, a local nonprofit in the Twin Cities. If you're interested to learn more or register, I will be putting some links in the chat shortly. And then we also wanted to highlight that if you want to learn more about employee ownership, there will be a lunch and learn event co-hosted with Project Equity. That is happening July 24th from 12 to 1 p.m. Central Daylight Time. And there'll be a similar webinar setup as today.
All right, and just as a final wrap up, we appreciate everyone that joined us today. And just a friendly reminder, you can also sign up for our monthly newsletter. So we send out information about all our programs that we mentioned at the top of the webinar. And you can track more information about Shared Ownership Center there as well. So please feel free to sign up for the newsletter, and it'll be part of this slide deck that we send out if you don't have a chance to sign up for the QR code right now. So yeah, please feel free to join us in the future. All right, well, that is our webinar today. Thank you everybody so much for joining us and for taking the time. We hope you learned something new, and we hope that we generated some interest in worker-owned cooperatives and shared ownership in general, and community ownership. And we would love to share more information going forward. So we hope to hear from you all again.
Thank you.
Take care,
Thanks,
everybody.
See you later.
Thanks so much. Bye-bye.